Desmond Howard's iconic pose, the Jordan era, the LeBron era, the malice in the palace, Lance's ear blowing, the block by LeBron, and Kurt Schilling's bloody sock. What these things have in common is they were brought to you by a very small, select group of elite cinematographers who have brought to your home iconic images. I was fortunate enough to not only interview these individuals, but also work with them. When we did these episodes around late April 2020, we were only a month or so into the coronavirus pandemic to be. There was no NBA bubble, all sports had just gotten canceled, and there was no George Floyd tragedy. And that was just the beginning of what became one of the most memorable years of most of our lives. Everyone on here was gracious enough to take the time, with so much uncertainty in the world, to tell their origin stories in sports and to speak on their experiences in the sports world. Everyone on here has formed a bit of a brotherhood. There's something special about shooting for sports television. Maybe it's the live element, maybe it's the sports element. Nonetheless, this is a group of elite shooters. Now, though I don't have them all on here, they still represent some of the best in the country. Hopefully you'll be entertained and enlightened listening to the questions and conversations about famous games and what it takes to have a successful career in sports television. Welcome to the crew. I'd like to introduce you to Joe Vanderford, Patrick Rondu, Stevie Lowe, Tim 2, and Al Issue. Enjoy. I want to thank everybody for being on this call/podcast. First off, taking the time. I mean, I know we got time, but still, you could have been doing anything else. So I thoroughly, truthfully appreciate it. I want to start off first off by everybody saying the name, and then after that, I want to know how everyone knows each other. So, like, if you know you met on this show or at this year, just bring me into like a sort of a flashback on the affiliations. How about we start with Cheese?
Oh, Patrick Cheese Fondue Rondu.
Joe Vanderford.
Okay.
Camera operator, Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Steve Lowe, camera operator from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Tim 2, camera operator from Gastonia, North Carolina.
Al Issue, camera operator. Born in Baghdad, living in Kentucky.
I'll redo mine. Patrick Rondo, camera operator, Chicago, Illinois.
There you go. Okay, so, and what I want to know is basically who met who first. Like I don't need to know when you met everybody, but what are you all's first out of this group that's on the phone right now?
I know the answer to that one.
There you go.
It's Pat Rondo. Al Issue.
There you go, Pat.
I met Al when I don't know if I'd met you in 1986.
When did you move to Chicago from California?
86.
Okay, so.
But I thought I met you earlier at the Olympic. We did some ESPN Olympic thing up in Minneapolis.
That could very well have been.
Yeah, but I knew.
I don't remember that year though.
I knew of you, and then, but yeah, I'll say 1986 when I officially met you, probably at Wrigley Field.
So one of those places. You and I know that. Consequently, after a couple of years, when I was moving to Vermont, we had several discussions of what I could expect from moving to the Northeast.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else can jump in.
This is Tim 2. I met Joe Vanderford. I was his utility at a Duke basketball game, and I believe, Joe, you can help me out here. I think it was 1984 or 85, and I had worked with Joe before then on some football games, which I know were in 1983, I think, but I didn't really meet him until I guess it was 84, 85.
All right.
That's accurate.
That's good.
I met Tim then. Tim was my utility, and Tim's business card said Tim Chew since 1960. Is that correct, Tim?
It's since 1961, but yes, that was all it said. And then Joe immediately said, "Hey, that's a cool card, but I know Ed Bedingfield, and Ed Bedingfield's card says Ed Bedingfield, USA." So I felt like I had failed, really.
Stevie Lowe?
And I met Steve Lowe in the Poconos, I think, during a NASCAR race. It might have been an IndyCar race because I think they did both of them there sometime. This probably would have been 85-ish. And Steve Lowe, who's become one of the best camera operators in the country, was an A2 at that point.
No kidding.
I was doing drive pair audio out on the field at this race car track. So it's the last day of the race, and I'm clearing out all the drive pair audio that I installed. And Joe Vanderford was up on a camera tower, and there's garbage everywhere, and he's got a Boy George T-shirt on from he used to work on the Boy George concert tour. So I look up at him, and he's got hair down way past his shoulders, and he's wearing a Boy George T-shirt, and that's pretty much how we became friends. You know,
who would have thunk it,
and
right?
I would have thought it. And then I met Timmy not long after that when I started doing college football, and I started getting involved with Chip Dean and that group. There was a bunch of camera guys, Timmy too, Ricky Lee Harold, Jimmy Vanderford, Joe Vanderford, Luther Fisher, John Lawrence. A lot of those guys were all on this college football, and I started doing college football a little bit with them, and that's how I met Timmy. I didn't meet Cheese until I started working at Wrigley Field doing baseball, and I've known Ish since probably 88 or 89 when I started doing baseball, and he was already in good with baseball because he was already doing Sunday night baseball, and I was making my niche, finding my way, working with I started working with Jimmy Moore on Wednesday night baseball, and at first it did not go well at all because I was used to shooting a certain way, and he patted himself off of Mark Payton, and it took me a while to understand what he wanted before I still at times don't understand what he wants, but it started there working with Jimmy Moore in the late 80s doing baseball.
To give some people some history, a little bit of backtracking, and I know typically everyone is humble to this, but for anybody who's listening, I want you all to kind of reel off the years and the type of shows that we're talking about here. I mean, it's not just regional stuff. I mean, we're talking about I'm talking about like finals and just sort of a quick, really broad stroke resume so people understand the levity of the shows that you guys have been all associated with collectively.
Good, Chief.
Yeah, I was going to say, I knew you guys were going to be hesitant about.
Okay. No, I just didn't want to step on anybody.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just start. 30 years NBA Finals. This would have been my 30th year if we had continuous NBA Finals. If we'd had that, 15 Olympics. 25 years of Oprah Winfrey Show. 5 years of Steve Harvey.
Chicago. What about Wrigley?
Yeah, three months of Rosie O'Donnell when we fired her butt.
What about the Cubs, though?
Cubs, been doing since 1987. Probably a good. I'd say I usually average about 60% of the home games. White Sox, Milwaukee Brewers games. Al knows we did all those games in the late 80s together, all the home games. A lot of times I'd be on a visitor show, sometimes on the WGN show, but not as often. Al was Mr. WGN. Al Issue was WGN. But I did a lot of the visitor feeds. And then NFL, I've been doing that since 85. Yeah, and that's pretty much the sports world. And of course, Chicago Bulls did all 6 championships with the Bulls and Michael Jordan. Of course, that's the big thing now, the Last Dance. And I did that final game. We were in Utah, and he pushed off. And yeah,
I thought you were a Bulls fan.
No, I was a Jordan fan, but not a. You know, being from California, I'm more of a West Coast team fans. Not so much Chicago Blackhawks. You know, we did all the Blackhawks games and Chicago Bulls and baseball and the college local Northwestern, DePaul, those kind of doing all those home games, and never a big Chicago fan from the team standpoint. I love the city, but I'm more of a West Coast fan. So,
okay,
that is all.
Go ahead, Joe.
I'll say right now, Keys, also known as Patrick, that's probably one of the most illustrious resumes of any of us, of anybody in the United States. He's probably done more big events than any single camera operator, I think, in the country, and we all tip our cap to him. I have been an ESPN man most of my life. I started out doing regional basketball at a network in and around ACC country called the C.D. Chesley Network. That's where I broke in. ESPN started in 1979. I've been mostly an ESPN person most of my life, and I haven't really done probably as many big events as most of this other star-studded group. But I sure have enjoyed working. But my approach has been different than some people's. I think I enjoy smaller events as much as I enjoy the large events. And I couldn't have enjoyed the work that I've done more over the past 40 or 45 years or so.
I was going to say,
sort of where I'm at.
I was just about to say, with the time that you've put in, is at this level, there's no small games. I mean, whether it's been a national championship or just even some of these teams that come through Duke and some of the athletes that have come through Duke, I mean, it's all relevant. You know what I'm saying? They're all heavy in their own right. And quite frankly, putting you all together makes it that much heavier. I mean, everyone's weight is legit. Totally, you know, because in this sense, I tried to bring out what I thought were some of the top tier peers, you know, and not this is no slightism on anybody else who's not on this phone, because I couldn't get 20 people on. I didn't want 20 people on, but if I had to make hard choices to bring in like a core 4 or 5, and I was like, the work says it all, even if it's not about necessarily how big the game is. The work says it all. And this way, I think everyone on the phone would agree that if you could see each other, there would be no slight in any direction that you go, you know? So I just want to be clear about that as far as if anybody listening, that's not so much about how big the show is. It's about what you bring to the show. And in this case, everyone on this phone brings a lot to the show, period. I don't care what camera. I could arguably, we could put any one of you guys on a camera that would be considered a throwaway camera by the production standpoint, and you'd still find a way to shine and get tallies and be relevant. And essentially, that's why I want everybody's story.
Yeah. If I may add something real quick about that. It's funny, even to this day, when I do low end zone camera for CBS, NFL, I think of Steve Lowe. Mm-hmm. When I do low third at Wrigley Field, it's Al Issue.
Absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
I do a tight camera for NBA, it's Joe Vanderford.
Absolutely.
And so what I do is I kind of, because maybe sometimes I haven't done that camera in a while, and we come into Wrigley Field and they say, Cheeser on low third. Okay, let's see, Al Issue. Okay, I remember Al used to do that. I always think of that
As a standard.
Yeah,
And not to slight anybody, the only reason why Cheese didn't mention Tim is because you guys run a very similar camera. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it was funny. Before I want one thought. I was talking to Hulk or George Rothweiler. I think everybody knows him. CBS. He was a staff guy. He's retired now. We were just talking about Tim too yesterday. He knows Tim very well, and he said, "Man, that guy, he was a great center court camera guy, do all kinds of handheld and all that stuff." So Hulk was giving you a lot of praise, Tim. Yeah, and same thing with you, Devin. I mean, I look over, there's Devin. There's camera 3. That's you do what you do, and the reason Jimmy Moore has you and Steve Lowe and Joe and Tim and everybody in these different positions, because you do the best. So what I do is if Jimmy Moore says, it's only happened a few times, but he had me run flash camera, and I actually had to do Steve Lowe's camera, and I had to do the tilt up from the light, go up to the lights with the graphic, and but I just put myself in Steve Lowe and go, okay. Jimmy's asking for this, and because I watch what you guys do all the time. I'm always looking in the return, because I'm usually, when there's timeouts and things, like I'm just sitting there. I'm not shooting like, Devin and Tim have to jump up, go into the huddles and all this. I just sit there, but I watch what you guys do, and I watch what Steve Lowe does, and I watch what Joe Vanderford does. And so I when I have to do their cameras, then that's it. And when I'm on baseball, it's Al Issue. So,
okay, Joe, I know you were talking about your rites of passage.
Yeah, that's really all I've got.
Okay.
Some of the other guys here have done bigger shows, but I sort of pride myself in doing non-big shows. That's where I hang my hat. But this is what's interesting about this group of camera operators is between all of us, we have worked virtually every sporting event in the country at one time or another, including things like golf and auto racing and wrestling.
Oh yeah,
Correct.
yeah. List goes on and on.
Correct.
I'm sure somebody's done poker. I've never done a poker game yet.
I've never done a poker game either, I have to admit.
I'll jump in now and say, Joe, I bet that you have done. I know that you have done putt golf with me, and I'm not sure if you run it, but I have done putt golf in Augusta, Georgia, home of the Masters. So that's probably my biggest gig. But just to expand on what Cheese said, which I thought you really nailed that, because I feel the same way, Cheese, when I'm working events that the other guys are known for. I always think about what they do. I think about what you do when I'm running midcourt. I think about Cheese running midcourt. But Joe, because I started out working gigs locally that he was on after the C.D. Chesley company he mentioned, Jefferson Pilot and Ray Fine took over the ACC. So I worked under Joe, and I dissected everything that he did, and that's how I learned to run camera. And even to this day, I learn something every game I work with him. He always has some framing or view or something that I would not have thought of. And so, I felt like Keys was saying that I was right on the mark. It was, and feel the same way about all the other guys. One thing I don't want to have to do, though, is follow them on a camera. The last thing I want to do is go right behind one of you guys and have to run that camera, because there's no way I can do it as good as you guys do. And it's a little intimidating. And then when we're all doing the finals, I have Devin 25 feet from me, competing with me. Cheese is, 30 feet away. Steve Lowe is over my shoulder. And Joe V is really the only one who's far enough away that I don't have to worry too much about duplicating what he's doing. At least he has a different angle. And, Ish, no matter what, Ish, your hair is so fine all the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to jump in, Stevie or Al?
Yeah, I'll go. I started working in TV. I worked at a cable station out of college, and then I got involved with Unitel, which was based out of Pittsburgh in the 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s until they disbanded. But they were. I learned so much by working with a lot of those camera guys and a lot of the engineers that worked on those Unitel trucks. A good many of them are probably retired by now. There's still some of them in the field, but that's how I learned the right way of doing television and being prepared and practicing and practicing and practicing. Like when I learned how to run camera for baseball, I was either an A2 or a utility, and I would shoot the entire batting practice. The camera guys would let me go to different cameras, and that's how I learned how to run camera, was by practicing during batting practice. I got involved with that. I started doing hockey, and to this day, hockey is the most challenging sport that I have ever done, as far as following a little puck, and you go, and then the whistle goes, and then you have to find people on the benches. To me, that still is the number one sport for me to shoot. I did a number of hockey Stanley Cup finals with ESPN, and I got that through Doug Holmes, who I've known since he worked at Unitel in the 80s, when he was a intern, and then he did crewing, and then he became a TD, and now he's, to me, the top director that ESPN has. So he helped me out immensely through that. I got involved with WWF Wrestling. I did handheld for WWF Wrestling for 4 years in a row around 1990. When Tim Walbert, who was their top handheld guy, he left the show, I became the entrance guy. So did some great – it was during the Ultimate Warrior and during Hulk Hogan's heyday. And I'll never forget the stuff that I learned handheld-wise with working with Tim Walbert on how to use a macro, how to frame. And how to be there at the right time. I learned a lot from him. He's now a director, but I learned so much from him. I've been involved with Sunday Night Football. In 1994, I believe I started doing Sunday Night Football, which evolved into Monday Night Football for ESPN. And I learned how to run low end zone camera from Steve Henry. Steve Henry taught me how to do it right. And he's still to me the best low end zone guy I ever saw. I got involved with baseball around 1990, and that was the game, because I played baseball and because I played basketball and I played hockey. Those three sports to this day are the easiest sports for me to shoot because I know those games, and I'm convinced that if you play a sport, if you're going to shoot it for television as a camera guy, those are going to be your best ones, because you don't second guess anything as far as a situation during the NBA Finals on when he's going to call a timeout, when he's not going to call a timeout, just different things that are going to happen. That has really helped me out. Doing baseball with ESPN is, for me, over the years, has just been, it's been incredible. I got to do the Cal Ripken game. I got to cover Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. I got to go to Cuba. Just Joe and I went to Cuba probably 4 years ago when Obama was in Cuba, and that was unbelievable. When he and Castro walked out to into that stadium, it was unbelievable. I think I've done 6 or 7 World Series. I did 4 years in a row in the late 90s when the Yankees won all their World Series, and I got to do low home for 5 years in a row for a World Series, and I learned how to shoot low home, and I prided myself of being the best at running a low home camera. A lot of these new stadiums now, there aren't low home camera positions anymore, because now there's people
Fans.
sitting in those seats in theory in the future. But I got to do through baseball with ESPN. The year 2000, I got on the crew for Little League World Series, and that is the most pure event that is ever happened. You know, kids aren't getting paid; they're playing for the love of the game. I got to do the Monet Davis game where she won. She pitched a complete game, first woman ever to win a game in the Little League World Series. That was incredible. And you know, just trying to think of anything else. Oh, the other big thing for Monday Night Football, you know, I had the pleasure of working with Mark Payton on Sunday Night Football. He and Freddie Godelli were just incredible to work with. I learned how to study football working with Freddie Godelli as a producer, because if you didn't have your shit together, he was going to be screaming at you. And he, you know, to this day, he's the best producer I've ever worked with, because, you know, he knows his stuff. He knows football. And what else? There was one other thing I wanted to say is one of the biggest events that I ever worked with. Timmy was on the show with Chip Dean in New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina, and they reopened the Superdome. That is my top 5 of all time events to do. Just the lead up to that, the excitement, rehearsing with U2, rehearsing with Green Day, rehearsing with Trombone Shorty, and then the event happened, and it was, you know, to this day, it still stands the test of time. So I've done 7, I think, Timmy, I think we've done 7 or 8 Super Bowls, and I had the pleasure of seeing the Steelers win in Detroit. I got to see the Steelers win that one. I got to see the Steelers win in Tampa Bay when they beat the Arizona Cardinals. So to be a fan and to see your team win a Super Bowl, a World Series, or whatever, it, you know, like hockey, I got to do the Penguins when they won. There's nothing better than running camera. You're getting paid, and you get to see your favorite team. So, sorry I'm long-winded.
No.
You know, I usually am. And then, you know, like last year, Ish and I got to go to London, did the first baseball games in London. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to go back.
Right.
So I think that's it for me.
So double A, man.
Good, Al.
Went to school in University of Illinois in the early 80s, and I started working for a PBS affiliate, and just some people there that really got me going.
Hold on, you're breaking up a little. Is anybody else hearing that?
Yeah.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
This not good. That's all right.
It
Is
went
this
bad for
better?
a little while. Yeah, much better. Go ahead. PBS affiliate.
Yes, PBS affiliate in Champaign, Illinois. People like Kirk Hepburn, Hector LaRue, Steve Doble all taught me how to run camera, and started working for an NBC affiliate while I was going to school, shooting news, editing news. And then graduated in 86 and moved up to Chicago, and luckily got a job working for WGN right away, doing baseball games. And they still did some hockey then, and still did some Bulls games for WGN. That's obviously where I met Pat Rondo, and just met a bunch of people in Chicago that really got me turned on to the idea of freelancing, which Bob Albrecht, Mark Hawson, Joe Posbeck, they all, you know, kind of said, hey, this is what you want to try to do. And I started working for ESPN then in 86, just doing different events, and just kind of blossomed from there. Moved to Vermont in the 90s because it didn't matter where you lived. When you freelance and you traveled all over, it didn't really matter where you lived. And my then wife and I decided we're going to move to Vermont and see what it's like and just travel and work. And that's what we did. I started doing a lot of postseason baseball and started in 95. Worked with all the great directors, Arnie Harris, Ken Fouts, Mark Payton, Bill Webb, of course. Working with Doug Holmes, Matt Gengel right now, and known Doug a long time, definitely since the 80s when he was coming into Chicago and TD and shows. But it worked with all these guys over the years on, like everybody has said, some of the greatest and most enjoyable events, that have really meant a lot. Saying all that, I will say, side note, probably the funnest sporting events I've ever gone to in all my life are every single one of my son's high school hockey games.
There you go.
There might not have been anything better sports-wise that I've ever been a part of than watching those games. Just, obviously been in the business a while, been doing a lot of it and enjoying it. And that's about it. Lucky to have gotten into all of this and still doing it.
So I'm going to jump around a little bit question-wise, and I want everybody to put in their 2 cents. And Stevie, you sort of started it off. I was going to wait for this, but I would like to know, what is everyone's most memorable games and why, and what is it that stands out about them? It could be more than one. It can be one, but just give me a sort of a list or an explanation on what made it memorable and what it was exactly. How about we start with Tim too?
Well, I'd say Steve mentioned the reopening of the Superdome, which was really just incredible. Just everything about that day was great. To see the city of New Orleans kind of come back. I mean, they weren't all the way there, but I mean, it certainly helped. But the Steve Gleason pump block during that game was really just the most incredible moment, I think, of anything that I've covered. There are other things, that come close for different reasons. A lot of guys who are not racing fans don't get it, but I did the race at Daytona in July of 2001, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. won that race. That was just 6 months after his dad died at the Daytona 500. And really, there were 170,000 people at that race, and the crowd noise drowned out the car noise on the last couple of laps. I mean, that was really unbelievable. Just to be just a tiny part of that. What a great scene that was. And I would also say, the Rams getting to do the Super Bowl that the Rams won, to be right there at the goal line for the Mike Jones tackle. As a fan, like what Steve was saying about all the Pittsburgh success that he's been a part of, and I'm sure the same thing for Cheese, Ish, and anybody that's covered their own teams winning championships. That's really cool. Really cool moments to be a part of, to get shots that people will see forever. To know that you're a part of that is really just incredible. And another thing, I have no attachment to Cleveland, but for those of us who worked on the NBA Finals that Cleveland won for a city that hadn't won a championship in that many years, that was pretty cool to be a part of that. And really, nobody in the TV business could say that they were ever a part of the Cleveland championship. So it was really a rarefied moment to be part of that. The fact they came back from 3-1, I guess, and they came back and won the 7-game series
against a juggernaut of a team too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they did.
All right, I'm going to go next.
This
is Ish. I have to go next because
I know what you're going to say.
I mean, it's obvious, obviously.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of humongous games, but there's nothing bigger in my whole life than seeing the Cubs win the World Series and being right there. It brings just a shake to my body, and it was an incredible moment. Obviously, the number of years and the number of people that have been a fan about that team forever, and it was the greatest thing to be a part of. So that has to stand out in my mind. But besides that, there's just so many others. There's so many others that you just keep thinking of, and you're just like, wow. Stevie mentioned Cal Ripken, the games in Cuba, the game in London. I mean, I remember doing a couple of Stanley Cup finals in the 90s with Doug Holmes. Those are just spectacular. It's just, there's just so many of them. And then there's even these little ones that stand out in my mind. I did a WGN Cubs game where Andre Dawson hits a home run onto Waveland Avenue, and a mailman runs out of his truck and picks up the ball and is jumping up and down and kicking. And it was the coolest, most funniest thing I've ever seen. I'll never forget that. It's just a regular old baseball game. And I'm sure there's tons of them that we all have that we, remember. And they may not be just the greatest sporting event finals of all time, like the Cubs victory, but they can be just a regular season game of nothing that just stands out in your mind forever. Absolutely. So, and also the working with all these people that some of those memories might not be something that happened on the field. It might be something that happened that day while you were setting up, or something that happened during that game that person said about this or that and just made you laugh for hours. Those parts of it are always, stand out just as much as the actual event and the sport.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Joe?
You know what? There are certain circumstances that stand out to me more than individual games, although I will say, being from our area in Central North Carolina, no offense to Tim, who used to live in Central North Carolina, all the Carolina Duke games at Duke are special. The hype has sort of overtaken that event, but because some of the earliest games that I ever worked were at Duke, and the gym for the most part is sort of the same as it's always been since the 40s. All the Carolina at Duke games are fantastic, simply because you got about 9,000 people in the gym, and the people on the Carolina bench are the only people that are pulling for Carolina, my alma mater. And it's the essence of sport to win in an uncomfortable or unfriendly environment. And the few times that Carolina actually wins over there, it's so sweet to be working those games, realizing you just sent 9,000 people home lonely and sad. all those events are fine, and because the gym is so damn old, on a good night there, it can be 2019 or it can be 1949. You don't even know what era you're living in, and sports can transcend time on a good night in that gym. So I think of those games, but more than that, and I think hockey's probably excluded. Tim, Tew, and I think between us have done a total of probably 6 hockey games. But in these other games, when it gets down to the nitty gritty at the end of the game, 10 seconds left, or in a baseball game, last out, the game is ending. It's a tight game. You've worked your ass off for the last three hours, and the payoff is coming in the next few seconds. And you usually have a few seconds to prepare for that moment and say to yourself, I have to be ready. Mm-hmm. I have to document this accurately, and I have to be totally dialed into the situation. And I think those moments are the moments that we collectively work to function well in those moments. And I love those moments when the game ends and we know collectively that we've done a great job at documenting the event. And I live for those moments as a camera operator. So that's sort of that feeling is what I'm going for when I work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned some things, Stevie Loray. Did you want to elaborate on any other games or moments?
Well, the only game was, I mentioned doing the Cal Ripken game. To me, that's a game that probably is my number one as far as what I'm going to remember. Leading up to that game where he broke Lou Gehrig's record, which will never be broken again, we followed that team and we got to do games, a lot of Oriole games. So leading up to that, what Cal Ripken would do after every game, he would go to the outside of his dugout and he would sign autographs. And he would let anybody that wanted an autograph, he would stand there and sign autographs. And the line would go forever after the game.
Mm-hmm.
We would be done striking an hour and a half after the game, and he would still be standing there signing autographs. So the day of the game, I'm in the Orioles dugout. He's right there beside me throughout the game. A foul ball came. They made special balls for the games with the number 8 and the number of the record on it. And I got a foul ball that the other players wanted to take off of me, and I stuck it into my pocket. And 4 years ago, TNT is in town. Devin's there with Steve Angel, and they're doing the Pirates. I don't even remember who the Pirates lost to, but they lost to I can't think of who they lost to. I want to say probably the Cubs.
Play the Cubs.
Just the fact that they lost is the part that you understand.
So Cal Ripken is one of the announcers. So Steve Angel, my good friend, he introduces me to Cal Ripken, and I have the Cal Ripken ball. And he and I are talking about that whole day, and he wrote Cal Ripken, and he wrote the date, and it was just really an incredible kind of like tying in all the loose ends from a whole 25 years of that. That ball's on my mantle in my game room, and then I think that's it. I did do the. With following people, we covered Michael Jordan and all these AAA ball clubs, the Birmingham Barons. So we were down in Chattanooga, Birmingham, and he ended up buying a whole bus for the team, and just following him around for 3 weeks. That was pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. But the Ripken game is the one for me is going to stand the test of time because that record will never be broken.
Stevie. One of those Cal Ripken balls just went for $2,400 on eBay. Just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah, but it doesn't have his autograph.
Let's hear from the man.
Who's the man?
You are the man. You know that.
Well, it's funny. I'm spending this time. Probably my biggest challenge right now is getting a haircut. And doing it myself. But what I've been doing with this downtime and is cleaning out my house. And I got into a closet where I have actually saved every credential since 1978. And I don't know if anyone else has ever done that, but for some reason I started, when I first got in the business, it was like, oh my God, credential. It says media pass and it's got my name on it. Well, I started I'll make it brief, but back when I was in California, I was actually still photographer with California Angels, and shooting stills and carrying around the Nikon camera equipment and teaching Rod Carew how to become a photographer. And I'm going through this closet with all this equipment and I'm finding all these pictures. And here's these literally, I'm guessing somewhere around 12,000 credentials, passes. Al will remember in the Chicago days when I did every Bulls home game. Remember the round sticker and just had, like it'd be red with the picture.
Sure do.
I saved every one. I always put them in something and I never unstuck them and stuck it to me. Anyway, so I'm just looking through all these shows and thinking about, over 3,500 Oprah Winfrey shows and traveling around the world with her. And then all the, being on the Bulls charter, Victor Smith and I, Sue Stratton flying us with the Lakers on their charter plane, going all over the country doing games. It's those kind of things that, and not so much the game. I mean, we've all done historic games. We've all done the Super Bowls. We've all done the World Series. We've done all that stuff for many, many, many years. And for me, a lot of times it's remembering the memories of those kind of things, of riding in the private jet that Andy Rosenberg arranged for us to get from Notre Dame football to our NFL game on Sunday on the West Coast, and we're on a G4. And there's Phil Doucette, our TD, and myself and Pete Stendel and maybe one or two other people and the producer and of course Andy, and we're flying cross country, and I'm sitting there going, really? This is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't so much the game or what we're doing, it's all the other stuff that I reflect on quite a bit. But if I had to pick one thing, and it still kind of gets me choked up, is in the 96 Atlanta Olympics, my shot, I've always been the tight supermo operator up top, ISO for all the track and field. Well, we did the opening ceremonies, and my shot was to have Muhammad Ali lighting the torch. So I'm that tight shot, had to throw the camera. I forget what the hell lens I had, a 55 or back then, whatever we had, 96. I remember throwing the extender in, and I had to get this tight shot, and I'm shooting Muhammad Ali, and he's shaking. And my father passed away from Parkinson's. And I remember Bob Basile next to me, and he looked over, and his tears were just streaming down my face. And I'm trying to hold the shot. And if you see the shot, you'll see how shaky it is. And part of it was due to being an extender, but the other part was just me just emotionally just going, oh my God, because it just reminded me of my father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's of all the stuff I've done, all the places I've done, that popped into my brain when Devin first mentioned that. Like, what's that really significant emotional event? Even, I just can't compare it to anything.
Right.
It was,
it's personal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Joe made a good mentioning on something that I want to jump on, and that was the idea that when we're covering games, regardless of what we might feel about it, there is that moment that you realize, okay, it's coming down to this, whatever this is, the end or the payoff, so to speak. My question to everybody is, as much as we cover sports, and this is for everybody, it's a two-parter. I want to know, in what ways do what we do mirror sports? And in that, what is your definition of chemistry as it applies to the crew? What is chemistry?
I can address, I think, the chemistry question. I think one of the reasons that many of us become camera operators is, on a good day, the chemistry between our crew, especially among camera operators, and maybe our relationships directly with the person directing the show, it's very similar to how a team might approach a ball game. Steve Lowe might be the best athlete among us, but a lot of us were probably pretty poor athletes and never got the maximum sort of team experience by playing sports when we were growing up. So this is the next best thing for me, is being part of a team. And if all of us are getting along personally, which is the case for most of the shows that we work, and we have the goal of making our shots complementary to everybody else's shots, fitting in, owning our particular puzzle piece of this big puzzle, and making our puzzle piece appropriate and letting that fit into the whole big puzzle. I think that sort of defines the chemistry that we're after as a group. So on a good day, we can feel good individually about the job we're doing, and maybe even feel better about the job we've done collectively. So that's what chemistry means to me, is being part of a camera crew.
Here's sort of and I want Tim and Al and Steve to still answer this question, but along with this, my other question would be, if a crew doesn't get along, can you still have good shows? If there's a lack of chemistry, does a show suffer, or is that just, are we talking more in theory than in reality?
I would say, no doubt in my mind, is that the chemistry suffers, the show suffers, but it's also way up to the director to maybe recognize that and keep it more together. But I can't imagine the show not suffering. And I'm not only talking in theory, but in known practice. I can't imagine the show does not suffer when the chemistry suffers.
I would agree with that. And I would also add to it that the few times that I've been on shows where it was bad chemistry, it was so unenjoyable. I could not objectively tell you if it was a good show or not, because I really don't even remember the show. I just remember having a bad time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I would say that in the position where we're at in our careers right now, we're all what's the producer's name? His name just slipped my mind. For
91 feet.
Stevie Lowe
McManus?
golf. No.
Yes, Fred. Yes, it
Y'all
is.
been handpicked. You know, that's the thing. Y'all been handpicked. So the crews that we're on now, we've all been handpicked, and I think if there was any kind of bad chemistry or somebody didn't fit in, the senior people, the main guys would go to the producer, would go to the director and say, you know what, that guy, I've experienced that actually on some my
First down
packages when we had some changes and they were going to bring a certain person on, and the main person said, that person's not going to be on a crew. That he's going to screw up the chemistry, and it's going to, and so the producer and director go, okay, you guys know everybody, you know who's who, you know who you can get along with, you know their personalities. So we don't really, I can't remember experiencing anything like that unless I go way, way back when I first, walked into a crew of people I didn't even know. And yeah, I remember them being like, ugh, that guy sucks, or he's not very nice, or, it wasn't, but when I joined this crew on the NBA, when I joined my football crew on CBS, and then all the years with NBC, we were handpicked. There was no, if didn't like Cheese is not going to be on our show. I mean, he was the guy who made the call. Him and
let me ask you this. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I don't want to paint this picture like everyone is so. It's not that people are mean, but realistically speaking, we have very different, very special personalities in general. So to not be included in the group, you must have done something extraordinarily strange. Give an example of like what type of person would not be accepted on a crew, considering all the crazy personalities that are already on crews. You feel what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
It's an interesting thought that one could not make it on a crew because they'll mess up chemistry, despite the fact that we know that there are plenty of people on crews who would not make it in the quote unquote real world, who would not make it in a corporate setting whatsoever, but can totally live and survive and do well in a production orientated place. So I'm looking for something a little more specific in terms of what makes a person not make it.
I can speak of, and I won't say the name. Alice, you knows this person. And and every time his name was mentioned. Now, granted, this guy technically great operator.
Okay, that's real.
Top 10 operator, great operator, but he's just a total asshole. And I've always said, if I was a crewer and I had to pick the guy who's like the best freaking technically, oh my God, he's just top 10 operator. And I have the choice of a guy he's a good operator, but everybody loves him. He's just a really nice guy. Producers will love him, director will love him. That's who I'm going to take. This one particular person that just popped into my mind when you said it. If I was crewing, if I saw his name on a list, no, because he's just, it's subjective. I mean, my opinion, and like saying an asshole is, what does that really mean? But just general, every time he's been on a crew, everybody complains about him because he's not, during the game or doing the camera or getting shots. Yeah, fine. No problem there. It's everything leading up to it, during the setup, during the teardown.
Gotcha.
That's really where we have to shine. I mean, and we have to really get along, because if one guy's sitting on his phone talking while you're building 8 cameras, sorry, and that's
Cheesy, in your vein on this, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to travel. I'd worked locally a lot, worked a lot of local shows, and there's nothing ripping local crews, but you do 100 and, say you do 80 baseball games a year, and then you do all these basketball games a year, and you get into this cycle where you're working a 9-game homestand. You're doing 9 games in a row. And I worked just a little bit in Pittsburgh. And there's people that are complacent. They're happy with showing up at 3 o'clock, getting on camera right before 7 o'clock after you fax in the afternoon, doing a game and going home.
Yep.
And when I work any local games here, I'm down there doing batting practice on camera. And I've had guys say, why are you on camera right now? And it's like, well, I'm trying to study who these players are, learn who these coaches are, because I'm working for the away feed, and these directors know who every one of their players are, and I don't. It's that type of thing. I just think that all of us in this group take our job so seriously that the amount of time that for our jobs, ours isn't an 8-hour job, an 8-hour day job, or a 6-hour day job. We're in on the early crew call. Those are 15-hour days, or 12-hour days, or 13-hour days. The average person can't do what we do. This is a specialized field. I completely, I'm all in on that. I mean, if you think I take for granted any of you guys as far as what you guys bring to the table every day, there's a reason we're traveling, and there's a reason we've worked as long as we have, because we aren't complacent and we don't take second. We want to be first.
Absolutely.
That's right. Right. Because y'all been handpicked.
I guess that's the answer for Devin's question. The question is, what is it possible for someone to fit in that? I forgot exactly the words you used, but kind of the reality is that there's so few of us that can really continue this at this level, that there may not be that many others that can work into that chemistry.
Absolutely.
Unless there's so many of the boxes checked that require what we do.
Right. And if I may jump in real quick, again, without mentioning names, and I know Alice, you know who I'm talking about. This person has been fired from every network by being lazy, by being complacent, but he got on because he was technically very good at what he did.
So the skill level did not outweigh the other intangibles. It makes me think of I was watching, actually, I caught one of the episodes of the Michael Jordan stuff, the Last Dance, and Rodman made a comment. He said something to the effect of, basketball is easy. He said, I would play almost for free. He said, I can get up, do basketball. That's the easy part. He said, the hard part is the stuff off the court. He was like dealing with the media, dealing with the fans, dealing with just all the other stuff. And I thought that was a deep statement, because typically people put so much onus on the moment that we see them on the court or on the field or on the ice or wherever it is, that they don't realize that in most cases the athlete feels more pressure when they're off the court, in the locker room, walking down the street. And in a sense, and another way that our business mirrors the sport is like, you know, it's the other stuff that people don't see. It's the batting practices. It's the watching the guys out there shooting early. Remember the Ray Allen stuff when he used to come out and everyone would be shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's out there hours before the game shooting, but it's all relevant. There's a reason to watch all this because you get a feel for what their cadence is or what's going on. I mean, we've all collectively seen so many things that are off the clock, quote unquote, that it's so interesting that it is the other stuff that makes up the whole, and what we do on camera is a big part to the fans, but it's very small in the grand scheme of everything.
All right, well, our game is only 3 hours and 15 minutes. It's the other 10 hours of work that we all do together that, you decide whether, is this guy good for the crew or a cancer?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That to me is the difference between, chemistry of a traveling crew or a rock band. These people that travel the world together, people don't see all that stuff like you were saying about Dennis Rodman. The game is easy. We do the game. It's all the stuff leading up to it and after that people don't see, that we all get along really well together, and we get the job done. And and it's much appreciated for me, because when I'm doing a local show, I'm telling you, it's like night and day. And these are smaller shows, and these are, you've all worked the local shows, and Al knows. WGN shows were actually quite big, but when you do the visiting show, it's 5 cameras or whatever and 3 operators, and it's just a whole different world. And so anyway, that was my conversation with Marty.
That's not to say though that there aren't some tremendous people in local markets and local shows all over this country that do fit in and would fit in perfectly fine.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's unfair, I think, to just have such a discussion about how bad some of that is, when in actuality, there's a lot of good out of it too. So,
and I didn't mean to make it sound like they're all. I think I even said there's a few. And I'm talking 2 or 3 people that they wouldn't fit in.
Right.
There's just no chemistry amongst anybody. But, we all have our people we gravitate to when I'm doing a home show, the people that are actually genuinely nice and work hard.
Yeah, I think it's a coin that has two sides.
And help
definitely.
with the setup.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a two-sided coin. I think there's some truth to what she's saying. I think there's definitely some truth to what Al is saying. But there is a decided line also, though. I don't think there's much gray area. I think there are guys who can perform at a high level no matter where they are. They bring it every day, whether it be locally, and they can jump on a national show and bring it. And then it's guys that aren't, and it's just what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I beat that horse. So I'm done. I'm done on that topic.
But here's another question for you all. What are the differences in the eras of television? Because we're now on the cusp of another era, but I don't know what to expect moving forward, which we were all talking about earlier. But what was television before even what it is now? And bring me into now and what might be the future. And I'm talking in terms of the travel, production, just the different aspects of television from when you first started to where it is now.
I don't think television has changed in 70 years in the fact that it's someone bringing a vision to someone else to see. That's all it's always been. Someone bringing a vision of something that eventually got audio to someone else to see. And that part hasn't changed. It's just how they go about doing it. Obviously, the technological parts of it that have changed and processed over the years. But the basics of it really is just it's one person or a few people have this vision of something that they want to bring to someone else to see. Even in the live sports stuff, that's what it is always. And the eras are literally simply technological leaps that have gone over the periods of times in different things, improving in different ways of showing that vision.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't want to simplify it, but it's just, to me, it doesn't seem like there's that much more to it than that basics.
I think the technology part that Ish just mentioned, now it's like, to me, even if you go back just a few months before the pandemic hit, it's like the technology of the future is kind of scary because so many jobs are going to be eliminated or changed. There's going to be a lot of people that we travel with that won't be traveling anymore. Like, with all the Rimmys and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So if you're just starting out in the TV business now, it's a totally different future than what all of us had when we started out. And there's a lot of uncertainty, at least in my opinion, there is.
Absolutely.
You think that, at least I thought a lot about that, how, your job gets whittled away. Like somebody somewhere is trying to invent something that can run handheld better than a human being, or can, whatever it is, a robotic camera, autonomous,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, or any camera, not just handheld. But, a few months ago, I would think, well, okay, that's still years away. I'll probably be retired before then. But now this pandemic, you wonder if that just hit the gas pedal on all of that development. That if companies can get the funding to continue that kind of work, how that would change everything for us. But then going back to what Ish said, it's still going to be the same thing. Somebody's still going to be bringing their vision or a vision of something to viewers.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, even before the pandemic, it was really kind of an unsettling time with all the advancements when, being able to do stuff like, you remember the football league that collapsed before the XFL, the AAF or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Skycam was, for all those games, or for most of those games, was operated out of Arizona. So the guys were not even in the stadium who flew the Skycam and operated the cam. And, that's a huge leap. When you can operate a machine that complex thousands of miles away, kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, well, when are we going to wake up and there's going to be somebody's going to tweet something about, yeah, we've figured out a way to do this.
Right.
And then your whole career, everything you worked towards, is just kind of flipped over.
Very true.
I think one of the big things as far as how things have changed is super slow-mo replays. Before, the umpire would make a call, the referee would make a call, and that was the call. Now you have super slow motion replays that stops the play. Stops it to look and to go and check to see if this super slow-mo replay showed it. The game all sports games have changed because of the rule changes that have made because of super slow motion replays. I'm not saying that super slow motion replay is bad, but it has changed sports because of everyone's need to know whether or not it was the right call or the wrong call. They want to take the human element out of all sports. One thing that's happened with this coronavirus in baseball is they want to now demo having an electronic strike zone because of COVID-19. That's one less person you have to have on the field is the home plate umpire. I just think that, and how now there's so many as Timmy said, so many less people on remotes, and it's going to get worse. I had a conversation with Jim Dove yesterday on that conference call, and the technology is just about there to have tape guys be at home to do their work. I just think moving forward, companies are going to look for reasons not to travel people, and reading about what is transpiring with these bubbles for NBA where they want to have 5-man camera people and all the rest robotics. That is hopefully just something that is going to go away once there is a vaccine. But I don't know. I'm certainly glad that I don't work inside of a television truck and that we're outside of a television truck.
Who would have thunk it, right?
I think the sports that are outside are the ones that are going to thrive, and the sports that are inside arenas, until there's a cure, there's going to be some tough times for those sports. I really think that. But as far as, technology, if ESPN, what year was it, Timmy, when they went to HD, when Jeff Willis and all those guys?
2003, I think, was when
2003.
When they started. Yeah, somewhere
because a lot of the other networks like CBS, none of them wanted to do it. And if it wasn't for ESPN doing that, that whole technology would probably be 3 or 4 years from happening before the research and development, because ESPN pushed it. That whole industry changed in 2000, whatever, because of that. And then they went into 3D niche for a while. And now we're into 4K and now 8K. But the most important thing is that you have to document the game. And then getting back to me, all these sports have completely changed because now there's replay reviews and challenges. And for me, doing baseball anymore, I don't enjoy shooting baseball much anymore because the games are so long and there's always challenges. And it's just, if there's a sport that I am going to give up, it's going to be baseball because of the length of the games.
It's a grind, and there's so many of them. It's the length and how many there are. It's hardly just 16 that you got to get through at maybe 3.5 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're talking about 80 some odd or more, depending on what your schedule is and what market you're in. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know Joe's a traditionalist, but for me and for today's, iPhone immediate, I think baseball should be a 7-inning game. I think it should be 7 innings. I don't, it's all traditional, but it should be a 7-inning game. It'd be about 2.5 hours at the most, and it would be more watchable for people.
Better on a lot of fronts with that. 150 games too, shorten that season.
Yeah.
Joe and Cheese, any thoughts on eras in terms of television and sports?
Gosh, I've seen quite a bit, as all of us have.
I mean, like Cheese, I've heard you tell me before about a time, and you even mentioned it briefly, that before or rather after a game, they would literally escort you guys out to get to the next spot.
Yeah.
Like police escort or something to that effect.
Yeah. Well, like what Steve was saying, the technology portion of it, and I agree with the baseball and certain sports in general. I guess I'm thinking more in terms of the changes I've seen with production, the way production, and I don't want to put a negative twist on it, but the way production treats people. I came up in a time when, and I mean, I know I've told Joe this story and other people, where I remember in doing the Boston Red Sox were playing the California Angels in the playoffs. And so this must have been what, LSU, like 1978, 77? What year was that?
That was...
You remember? Late 70s.
It's got to be late 70s, I think.
It was late 70s, and Boston ended up beating the Angels. But anyway, I remember standing, and I was just kind of getting into TV then, and still shooting stills for the Angels. And I remember standing outside, and actually ABC hired me as a runner. As I was at the stadium, somebody said, "Hey, this guy knows where everything is." So Chet Forty said, "Okay, get him in the truck, and he's gonna run for us." So Chet Forty's directing this stuff, right? And so I met him for the first time, and I was pretty pumped up. It was pretty exciting. It was playoff, but I wasn't working TV. I was still, but for some reason I ended up working as this runner. But my memory, the thing that I remember the most is standing in front of the TV trucks. It was beautiful. The sun was setting, Anaheim, California, and up comes walking these 7 or 8 camera operators. And they all had their, back then in the 70s, everybody wore the sweatpants suits, the velour.
Yeah.
And they had the bags over their shoulders. And they're walking from the parking lot. And now everything's already in and, set up. But I remember these people standing there going, wow, here comes the camera guys. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's pretty cool. And they walked in, and I had befriended a couple of them. Hutch Hutchinson is one of my first contacts I ever made, and he showed me how to do the camera down at low third, actually. The full up, the great big, what was that, 357, whatever that model was, that giant camera. But, I just, they came in, they do the game, and they leave. They put their bags over their shoulders, they lock their cameras down, they leave. And so that's when I said, well, this still photography's for the birds, because I got to stay till midnight and printing pictures and doing all this crap and with chemicals and in a dark room. And they're back at the hotel in bed and making 10 times more money. And that was when I decided to go back to college and get my degree in TV and become a camera guy, so I get an internship at least. So, if I know some of you guys have started late 70s, early 80s, you were all in the business or getting into the business. I think I'm a little bit older. But I saw that transition, and then all through the 90s, I got through the 80s, mid to late 80s, and started working with NBC, and it was really nice. They took really good care of us. It seemed like we had a level of respect that we just don't have anymore these days. I don't know if you guys can agree or disagree with that. As far as production, people appreciating what we do on a day-to-day basis, and then perform at the highest level during the game. But back then in the days, camera guys and stuff, they didn't work as hard as we did. It was like they just had this different level of respect, and it's always stayed with me. And it kind of bothers me a little bit. And I don't know when I think the change was made when everybody started going daily hire. And now you got to remember, back then those camera guys were staff guys. There were no freelancers back then. The freelance guys. Market didn't start until what, 83, 84, something like that, when the networks actually started letting freelancers in and non-union, quote unquote, members. That
was what the contracts agreed to then.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I don't know if I got the right year, but I just remember there was this change in the business and the industry. To me, that's what I've seen that sticks to me the most. Yeah, the technology, oh my God, is incredible. Some of the stuff we have now. And like Steve was saying too, I know for a fact, and I've had some conversations with the people who are in the know, that due to social distancing and things like that, there won't be a center court camera, especially with the announcers. And so technology is, taken over. They've already tested the gear. They have periscope cameras that can, there's not going to be that human reaction when the ball's in the right end and and Lance Stevenson's blowing in LeBron's ear in the left part of the floor
Right.
that nobody sees.
Right.
That only a human would be able to see that.
The irony
And
to that
sense
is that
that.
even a robo operator would admit that they don't see as much as any of us
No.
who are actually on the court
No,
can
all
see.
they see is what's on their monitor. Yeah.
They'll be the first ones to admit that.
So to me, that's what I've seen the most. And again, I don't want to. It's not nothing really negative. It's just the nature of the business.
Right,
It's all come into money now. It's all about the money and saving a buck, and getting these guys to and from the cheapest way. And we all know I've gone from the 90s where we were in charters, we were police escorted out of after events, like you were saying, Devin.
Mhm,
that's what brought all this up.
Right.
That was in the 90s. That's all gone for the most part. And just treated with, I think, better respect, with more respect for our craft and what we do.
A sense of prestige,
Yeah. And that's why I got into it. I thought it was cool. I thought these guys were like gods, back in the late 70s or all through the 70s. All those guys were, oh my God. Anyway.
No, absolutely.
That's all. Does anybody agree with that or disagree that's been one of the changes that we've seen along the years of how productive?
There've definitely been changes, but I do my best. We're all a little bit older, a little bit long in the tooth. It's going to be our job to shut as much of that out as possible.
Yeah.
And if we want to continue working, and geez, especially you and me, I think are close to retirement age. If we want to keep working, it'll be interesting how we cross this next hurdle that's going to exist because of the coronavirus, as has been pointed out early in this conversation. This business is going to change dramatically, and I think people in control of the money, in particular, are going to use this as a time to change things. Less number of cameras, less people on site.
Yep.
Coin is going to be guarded very carefully.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm done.
Oh, I was just going to say the Remy's have proved that we can do that without people on site other than camera people. So I don't see anything more than 3 people in it going forward after this coronavirus. 3 people in the truck, just a handful of camera operators, and director and producer will be in Bristol. CBS or wherever. CBS is in the process of making another control room to do what ESPN's been doing. So it's going to be interesting how many cameras and what on September 10th, who's going to be in the truck, if anybody's going to be in the truck. Will Bob Fishman be sitting at his home in West Palm Beach, Florida, directing the game from his house? We've all proven that can all be done. They're doing, I watched a show on CBS last night where it was all Zoom, the whole show, the entire show. And it was actually pretty good.
Huh.
But they're all sitting in their house, the actors, reading their lines, doing the show. And that's going to be the new norm until we get the vaccine and just like the Spanish flu, it took 11 months, 10 to 11 months for that to finally
work its way through.
Disappear, but it changed the world, so, and this is even worse. And
what Pat meant to say was to wash through. Sorry.
He broke up, but I heard what you said. So his
Dev, you're a good moderator, Dev.
Yeah, Devin.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
Devin, you haven't told us any stories.
No, because it's not. You know what? It's funny. I because I'm the moderator. I'm trying to push along the story, but I'm trying to get you all's story. To be honest, you know what I'm saying? Like, quite frankly, you guys have a lot more time in this. I've listened to a lot of you all's stories over the years, and have been taking note of personalities and stuff. And I find you all interesting enough that I feel like other people want to hear you all's perspective of the business. And And I know you all are the right people to tell these stories. So I consider you all my peers, but in some ways, you all are also my teachers. So in that way, I'm humbled and excited that you all are on with me. I'm perfectly fine with listening. And but I do have another question for you guys. For people who don't understand or don't know, explain the types of directors. Explain to people what a director really brings in terms of a personality and what those personality types are across the board from 0 to 100.
Well, I think it could be useful, and you could do it or somebody else could do it. But I think a lot of people at home don't really know what a director does for a live television show.
I agree.
Well, if you want, I'll explain.
Yes,
I'll try to do it very briefly what a director does, and maybe some of the other guys can address different personalities or techniques that directors might have.
Absolutely.
For a live TV show, there is a producer who's sort of the ultimate boss of the show, who sits in a control room, which for us is most often in a truck parked outside the arena. The producer's in charge of the program as a whole. The producer submits program ideas to announcers, sort of guides the announcers through the show. And in our case, most of the time, the producer selects videotape replays during the show. But the producer is the ultimate person in charge. The director is more of someone who executes things, and the director is the person that directs the camera operators primarily during the show. He directs, or she directs, camera operators into shots of, for example, for a basketball game, somebody at the free throw line, or players lined up along the lane, or a coach's shot, or calling for shots of specific players. And the director is the person that coordinates all the movements of the camera operators. We, the camera operators, do a lot of this stuff on our own. We have our own ideas. We know what our responsibilities are during a show, be it a camera that's seated underneath one of the baskets, or a camera that's located near midcourt, or cameras located up in the stands somewhere. And the director coordinates us with our experience and our knowledge, and supplements what we're doing with ideas of his own or ideas of her own. So the director is the person that primarily coordinates the movements of the camera operators and adds things like graphics, executes that. So simply, the producer and the directors are the two bosses of the show, and we respond primarily to directors who have many different techniques and personalities. But from our point of view, the point of view of camera operators, the character of the show largely is due to the efforts and techniques and skill of the director.
And antics.
Yes.
That's a great explanation.
I think that was pretty damn good.
Yeah. So in that context, if you guys can give me examples of types of directors and styles and antics and ways.
I think most of the directors that we work with are so great at what they do. They're so experienced like us. They've been at it a long time. And so it's vastly different than the folks who work at a local level. Because you can imagine a director coming in to direct, say, a Charlotte Hornets game, and he's a West Coast, he or she's a West Coast director, so they may see the Hornets, the Hornets local crew twice a year. So they may have to actually direct more that way. Those people can come off as being a little more overbearing to the crew than maybe they actually are. People that we work with all the time know us, we know them, so there's that chemistry that you talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That that makes a big difference in how everything goes. And you could have like a kind of a freewheeling director who may rely more on the camera operators to he trusts maybe their instincts more than someone else who has has a more concrete vision of what they want at any particular time during a show.
Good.
Stevie, go ahead.
I've always looked at, director, producer. I've always looked at the producer. To me, I've always looked at a crew of whatever sport as that crew is like a football team. Like the producer is the head coach. He's in charge of the look of the show. He's in charge of dealing with the announcers and the director. Did I say producer is the head coach?
Mm-hmm.
Director is the quarterback of the team. He is the leader, and you're looking for him for guidance. You're looking for him for positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. And I've learned in this business that if you're not thick-skinned and you can't take criticism, you're not going to improve. You have to be able to not be yelled at, but be coaxed in a way to shoot differently than what you are accustomed to shooting. There's certain directors that, working with people like Chip Dean is completely different than working with a person like Doug Holmes. Chip Dean, he is more, to me, composition. I learned so much as far as foreground, background, and shooting composition for him and layering. What's in your frame. It's not only what's in right in front of you, but it's in the background, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. There's directors like Doug Holmes that he is the type of quarterback where it's nothing but positive energy. It's nothing but having fun. But as far as when the moments matter, that's when the directors are the most important person in that truck. Because that person is on the air, and a director is sitting in a TV truck, and he's looking at 1,000 monitors. And for them to be able to see what is in your head and where you're going to go in 1 second, and they trust you, there's nothing like it. There's other football directors, Drew Esikoff, Craig Janoff. Craig Janoff did Monday Night Football for a number of years. His ability to see what was in front of him and get it onto the air in a fast amount of time was just incredible. Bill Webb was the same way, how he would be able to not only document the play, but show the emotion of the players, emotion of the crowd, emotion of the umpire, just in a split second. For us, and as a number of years that we've all been working, if we don't work with directors that motivate us and want us to be better, we're not going to work with those directors. We have a choice. And, there's certain situations where I could have worked for these certain people, and I chose not to because I want to learn. I want to get better. Mm-hmm. I don't care what my age is. I want to get better. And, that's to me, the most important thing of a director is to engage each and every one of his camera guys in a way that what he shot yesterday might be good, but there's a second shot the next day that could be better. So I think that's about it.
Couldn't have said that any better.
That's right.
That was good, Stevie.
So we're speaking about directors. We haven't talked about the types we don't enjoy, but it's almost unnecessary unless somebody wants to mention the types that they don't enjoy versus the ones that we do, as far as what a person brings.
And if we've defined what a director is.
Yes.
As far as the kind that you don't want, I just speaking for myself, there's not many around. They're all pretty darn good these days. When we were talking earlier about the changes that you've seen in the industry, or at least that I've been through, I've worked with all those directors that Steve Lowe mentioned, and damn, everybody's great. Back in the day, it wasn't quite like that. and even before my time, and I used to hear the stories. But nowadays, directors are doing a great job. It's a little different culture. The culture has changed, and I think that's one of the nicest things, and makes it more fun than the stories I used to hear from the guys that brought me into the business. So no complaints there. But I agree totally with what Steve Lowe said. I think I could have said it better, describing how the director is the quarterback.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Yeah,
Good.
that was a great analogy. Absolutely.
Down to third. Oh boy, here we go.
Tell me some stories, either a crazy fan story or a memorable athlete story that stands out to anybody.
I'll go with the athlete story.
Okay.
Let me do the athlete story.
Go ahead.
I'm doing a Red Sox Yankees at Fenway Park, and God love, but boy, he wore it all on his sleeve every minute of every game, all the time. And he had struck out, was walking back to the dugout, and I was shooting him. And he definitely was annoyed with that, as I saw as he came back walking into the dugout. I swung off, started shooting something else, only because that was it. The story was over. We weren't talking about
Strike three call.
striking out. The story was over.
Mm-hmm.
But little did I know, had walked all the way up to where my camera was back at old Fenway Park. It was literally right in the dugout there at the end.
Right.
And he stood behind me, and I could just sense someone. He wasn't just behind me. He was breathing down my neck. I can only imagine. And he just said this: "Try to shoot me now, cameraman. Try to shoot me now." And of course, my hair raised on the back of my neck, and my eyes flung wide open, and I just mumbled something like "mommy," and that was it. You know, he walked away, but it was obviously something I'll never forget. As far as a great little tidbit with a fan. Right. There have been many, but that one's my favorite. God love him.
I've got a good Al issue story with Albert Bell.
Okay.
This is 1995, the year that the Baseball Network and NBC televised the World Series. So we're doing the Cleveland Indians against
Miami, right?
No,
it was the ALC.
Atlanta Braves. It was the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, it was the World Series. That's right.
Okay. So Ish is getting ready to work with Hannah Storm. She's the NBC sideline reporter. And they want to do this. They were doing an interview with somebody in the dugout, and there was a glove and there was this shake drink, and they had to move it to be able to do this interview. Well, the glove and the drink happened to be Albert Bell's drink. And he came out, and I was standing in the background, and I still remember him getting into it with Ish and with Hannah Storm, and Hannah Storm not backing down and right back at his face, yelling back at him. I remember shooting Albert Bell during games. He's in left field, and I'm doing low third, and he's waving me away from shooting him. I'm shooting out in the outfield, and I'm like, he's pointing at me, not to shoot him. He's talking to me. How, he was a loose cannon. I've got one other baseball player story. Is when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were going to break the records, the home run records. We were following McGwire and Sosa a lot during that month, and I was working for Fox every weekend. I would do their ENG interviews and everything. And the day before we did the interview was when all the news came out that he had the andro in his locker. So he comes in and sits down with us, and I still remember how he did not want to talk to any of us at that time. And then after that, it all blew up. But we did it like the day after they found that andro in his locker, and we had to do an interview with him. And that was awkward. He was an intimidating large man at that point in his life. So.
With anger issues at times too, I'm sure. So
Go ahead, Tim. I'm still trying to think of something.
Okay, so we were doing a Monday Night Football preseason game. The Arizona Cardinals were the visiting team. I don't remember who they were playing. Not really important, but I was on the Cardinals sideline. And, the mood and vibe at a preseason game is a lot different than a regular season game. Guys who are wound up during the regular season might be a little more relaxed in the preseason. So they'd toss the coin and all this stuff. The Cardinals were going to be on defense first. And so we're at that point in between the coin toss and the kickoff. So, there's like a 2.5 minute, 3 minute commercial break. So I'm just standing there beside the Cardinals bench. And, I'm holding the camera down by my side. I have on the NFL vest. I have on an NC State cap. And Larry Fitzgerald, the Cardinals receiver, starts walking towards me. And, I don't know Larry. Never spoken to him or anything. So I have no idea what he's going to say. So he comes up to me and points at my cap and he says, NC State, huh? I said, yeah. He said, that's the third best school in the Triangle. I said, well, I don't think so, but go ahead. He says, well, you got Duke. I said, well, it's a pretty good school, I guess. He says, and then you got Carolina. I said, well, they're a big rival. I'm not so sure of your ranking, but go ahead. And he says, and you got NC State, the third best school in the Triangle. And so I really have no way out because, he went to the University of Pittsburgh. So I can't even think of a Penn State joke or anything, So I got no way out. And then I look over his shoulder and I see Adrian Wilson, his teammate, getting ready. He's limbering up to go out on the field. And he played at NC State. And Adrian Wilson, I don't know if you know it, but he is an unbelievable athlete. He's the kind of guy, he was the first guy that I ever saw who would stand in a swimming pool with water up to like his waist, and he would jump out of the pool onto the deck without using his hands. He was that kind of athlete. But most importantly, he went to NC State. So I say to Larry, I said, well, how don't we walk over there and tell Adrian Wilson that you ranked NC State third? So he turns his head and looks at Adrian, and then he looks back and he's got that big Larry Fitzgerald smile, and he says, oh, we're not going to tell Adrian that. I said, well, why not? He's right there. He said, we're not going to tell him because his arms are too big. And then he pinched my bicep, and he said, your arm's not too big, and walked away.
Joe, if you got something.
Yeah, I've got one. I've had very few brushes with greatness for the most part during my career, such as it is. I've generally run hard cameras, often stationed away from the action. So I'm not on the court as much as some of you guys have been. But
this isn't a story about your favorite player and how he gave you an autograph, is it?
We'll skip. Okay, I think he's till we resume play in the NBA. I'm not talking about.
How about
that's it.
There we go.
Actually, that's a good story. Okay, we'll do the story then. I did run handheld during a gosh, who would have was Shaq and
knocks it down.
playing for Cleveland at the same time?
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a game at Cleveland during Shaq's brief time in Cleveland, and
Into the game and buries the three.
was Shaq's teammate. And they were both in the locker room before the game. And I haven't done too many locker room shoots pre-game, but I was doing it that night. And as Devin and Cheese in particular can tell you, our goal during these locker room shoots is to remain pretty much invisible. We'll get over in a corner, and we really don't want to bother the players while they're showering or doing anything else that people do in locker rooms. But that night, I was shooting Shaq across the room. He was probably 15 feet away. And it was Breast Cancer Awareness Night at the old Gund Arena. And everyone was wearing sneakers trimmed in pink for breast cancer awareness. And Shaq was putting on his shoes across the locker room, and I was getting a very polite wide shot of Shaq putting on his shoes. And I had my in the viewfinder and wasn't really aware of too much going on other than Shaq in front of me across the room. And all of a sudden I had a feeling, sort of a whoosh feeling, that something very large had just been thrown at me and just barely missed my head in the locker room. And I looked behind me after I heard the thud, and it was the world's largest breast cancer awareness sneaker you've ever seen. Must have been like a size 40. And I looked up, and I could see Shaq laughing, and I could see dressed in street clothes. He was injured that night. Obviously had thrown the breast cancer awareness sneaker at me. And so I told the director in my headset, I said, "This is camera 3. I'm getting off and going back to the court." And that's all I said. So I went back and started doing the game. And Cleveland was on my end of the court. And one of my jobs when I'm in that position under the basket is to shoot the nearest bench, players on the bench. And I would shoot the bench periodically, and dressed in a really snazzy suit down the end of the bench. For the entire first half, gave me the finger. Every time I would point my camera over there, just giving me the finger. The entire first half, and staring at me. Just that finger was right there, just constantly giving me the finger. So that was my breast cancer awareness shoe night in Cleveland.
In the spirit of awareness.
Yeah.
God. It's funny.
Cheese, what about any of the many of encounters, like when you've got maybe a piece of memorabilia from somebody? You've had a couple people actually give you things, like maybe the robe, Shaq, something like that?
Yeah. I've been the recipient of different objects over the years. I'm sure everybody has, I'm sure with all the baseball that's and Al do down low, or you become friends with players, especially baseball. Football not so much. You just don't see these guys, and you usually don't see them without a helmet on. It's very, you don't. I don't recognize football players or make friendships, but mostly baseball and NBA. And it's one time we're doing a game in Chicago, and it was when Shaq was playing with Miami. And, I knew him pretty well and all that stuff. So after the game, I was doing handheld. So now I got to go to strike the hallway at the United Center there. And there's lights and there's a monitor and there's some audio stuff. And so I'm striking away, and somebody comes running up and says, "Hey, Shaq's looking for you." I go, "What? Really?" "Yeah, Shaq's looking for you. You got to go. He's down the hallway, and there's a whole bunch of people, following him around." So he's walking around with these shoes in his hand, and so I started heading that direction. And I think I was carrying a monitor. I was carrying something in my hands because I wasn't really sure what this was about. And I get down there, and there's this whole sea of 40 photographers and reporters and following Shaq like the Pied Piper. And he's carrying these gigantic size 22 shoes. And so I kind of walking up, and he was looking around, and we finally made eye contact, and he comes walking over. And this whole entourage follows him, and he hands me these shoes and says, whatever. I think he said, "Hey, thank you," or "Hey, man, go to your destiny." That was something I always said to him before every game. And he would walk over to me before every game, and I'd have to say that to him. It was just one of those things. Mm-hmm. But after he handed me the shoes, we gave me a little hug, handshake, and he walked away. And all these reporters stand around, and they all just kind of like, with these quizzical, look on their face, like,
Who the hell
why
are you?
the hell why did he give him to you? They all thought he was there was a person in a wheelchair just down about 10 feet from me.
God.
And they all thought that he was going to give it to they're waiting for that moment where the player gives it, to a disadvantaged person or something like that.
Not that day.
I just thought that was kind of funny because all the photographers and everybody walked away. It was like, well, screw this.
Yeah, anticlimactic all of a sudden.
Just some guy, yeah. She's, Shaq's walking up and down the hallways looking for me, and they thought, oh, this might be a good story, So I just thought that was kind of funny, but anyway.
Red in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Roll red, upright track red.
What is perfection in terms of, what we do? Not necessarily outside, but in terms of work. What is perfection?
I think, and I feel this way, I think you're always strive for perfection. Perfection is something you never get to. Perfection is something you need to always work for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what perfection is.
Yeah. And if Jimmy Moore's always said, if he ever has a perfect game, that's it. He's done. So I guess we've never had a perfect game, but you're right, Al. It is something. I don't know if I've ever seen perfection. What would be somebody give an example of what would perfection be? Would that be what's her face in the gymnastics when she scored the 10?
Nadia Comaneci or something like that? Or the most recent girl was
Yeah. I guess would that be a definition of perfection and something that we do sports related? I'm not sure.
It's very subjective. That's why I ask. Everyone's take on that is going to be very different.
Yeah.
I know. I agree. That's something that you can't achieve. But I bet we've all watched other people do shows that we're not involved with, that we don't have any kind of emotional or financial tie to. And I bet you we think those shows are closer to perfection sometimes than we would ever think shows that we're on are. Like I would, I can watch whatever show you could pick that I was on, and you said, "Oh, this is the best show you guys have ever done." I could look at myself, I go, all the things I did wrong. So I would never think that. But I might watch another show somebody else does, and I go like, "Oh wow, that was really incredible,"
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of stuff that I do, like you said, it's not something you strive for, but you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
Steve Lowe made a really nice comment. I think it was when Ish was off the phone, Steve was comparing a producer to a head coach and a director to a quarterback. But Steve basically said, you try to get better every day. And he also added, no matter how old you are, which I thought was funny because we all are getting old. And among this group, often we don't all work together every time, but when we're on site, any one of us is often the oldest person on site or close to it. But we try to get better every day. And when you get to the point where you're not trying to achieve perfection the next day, you might as well hang it up. I mean, we always try to get better. Yep. And even though we're cynical about our jobs at times, this group, including the moderator, always tries to improve. And that's why this is a pretty good group.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, to add on to that, Joe, what you said as far as, it could be an unbelievable game, but if we go into a building and either the survey that we have in front of us telling us where to set up stuff is wrong, or if we're in at the wrong hour and there is practices or whatever things that are holding up our setup,
obstacles,
that could affect your whole day. As Chip Dean always said to me, he said, even though he didn't have to do a couple of the parts at times, he said it's a 3-step process. It's the setup, it's the game, and it's the teardown. And if you have all 3 of those things go good, then you're having a pretty good day, But I can't tell you how many times we've had great games, and the atmosphere, as far as trying to either you're crammed to get everything set up in time, you just don't appreciate what you just shot and what you just did because of what led up to the game itself.
Very true.
What I mean?
Very true.
I like how the NBA is now in the finals, where everything is spaced out. You have more time to enjoy it. You have more time for setup. You have more time to prepare. You have more time to get rest. The conference finals for NBA, there's games every other day. And a lot of people who aren't in television don't realize the lack of sleep that people have before these huge events that start at 8 and 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing things that are done by people on 3 and 2 and 1 hours of sleep that have been achieved by technicians in this business. And I can't tell you in the course of the last 2 months how much sleep I have gotten.
Oh my God.
Sleep is overrated.
Preach.
Sleep is very overrated. I am so complacent right now as far as using your mind, I'm really good at painting right now, things like that, but
spackling.
Yeah, spackling. But I want to go back to having 3 and 4 hours of sleep at times, getting up early in the morning after working all night and going home and being tired the next day. But that's what I want to get back to. But as far as perfection, we're always striving for it. That's I don't take it for granted as far as trying to phone in a game. That's too easy to do.
So one definition of perfection in our business might be you got the best shot you could have gotten under the circumstances.
No matter
sleep.
What those circumstances, right?
Yeah. Devin, in your case, somebody crowding you in that little teeny box you got to sit in under the basket for NBA games.
Right.
You got a pretty good shot, even though the guy next to you had his elbow in your ribs.
Right.
That particular
Right.
time.
Or somebody spilling beer down your back or something.
Geez, you got a great shot of the announcers, even though somebody just kicked your tripod leg out. That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Steve, you got a great shot while somebody was climbing on your scaffold.
Shaking it.
You got a great shot of someone in a dugout while the team manager was cussing you out from behind, calling you a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And I was eating a hot dog.
True.
Are there many perks? I mean, we didn't really get into schedules and things like that, but in terms of perks, what would you all say are some of the perks, like the things when you walk away, when you look and you reflect, what have been the perks? What are the upsides?
Memories.
It may not matter to everybody, in this group here, but like if you've watched ESPN during the shutdown here and see all of the games that you've worked that they show again, that they pick as like this game is worthy of being re-aired because Ray Allen hit that 3-pointer, told him to put that effing rope up and hit the 3-pointer, or the Superdome game that Steve talked about earlier, or whatever, the Cal Ripken game. They've shown all these things, and to sit back and to just have the TV on and walk through the house and look over and say, wow, I remember doing that game. That was Auburn versus Florida from like 1996 or whatever, And, it may not seem like a perk to us at times, but for the people who watch these games, that would be that would be like a dream come true for a lot of those folks, even if they had to put up with the lack of sleep, travel, hotels, all that stuff.
The elements.
They would be willing to do that in a minute.
I agree.
Dev, you had mentioned earlier, I think you alluded to what kinds of things fans might say to you when you're working.
Correct.
And when you're running the handheld camera, which you often do on the court, and Cheese often does, and Tim often does. Ish does sometimes. Steve and I don't do as much. But when you're in the stands, by far my favorite approach by a fan is always somebody that comes up to you and taps you on the shoulder, and you look over and say yes, and they have a handful of tickets, and they just show you the tickets. Sometimes they don't say anything at all, but what they want to say is, where is section 42, row 7?
That's right.
Seat A through D.
I'm lost.
And you look at them, say, do I look like an usher? Because what you want to say, you're running.
So they say, Joe, they say, are you going to be here all game?
Or they ask you to put them up on the big screen.
Yes. But, getting back to what was just said, sometimes people will ask, do you have to buy your own ticket? And they're serious while you're working.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's time for us to say, we are lucky. No, we never buy our own ticket. And we've seen a lot of damn good ball games. How great can that be? And to me, that's the biggest takeaway for us, even though sometimes we can't really concentrate on the real drama of the game, or what a great game it is, or how well someone played in a game, because we're so busy doing our jobs. But we've seen a lot of fine ball games.
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I had an interesting conversation with Chip Dean after he stepped down from Monday Night Football, and he said what he was going to miss the most was his road family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He said that his biggest adjustment is him being home, living in Connecticut, not traveling. And he said, I can't tell you on one hand how many friends I have in this whole neighborhood. And I'm the exact same way. It's, my closest friends are you guys.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier. You guys are my family. So.
It's so interesting how it's turned into that. We we live in different regions, and yet and still, I would agree 100% with that. It's people from all over the country that I'm always looking out for, trying to hear from, email, whatever it is, just have more of a connection to than sometimes my neighbor, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get random texts and emails from other crew members from across the country. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? So it's kind of nice. Absolutely.
I think I've hit most of my cue points here. This is something that Joe just mentioned, and I do want to kind of piggyback on it, and then we can wrap it up. When a fan typically will talk to us, they think that we are, and we can be fans of the games, but they think that we're fans. And they ask us, I get this a lot, is like, do you see the game the same? So my question to you all collectively is, do you see the game the same? And in what way do you think you see it differently from a fan? And what ways do you think you see it the same? And what is the difference between, shooting the game versus watching the game?
I mean, I guess if you're watching a game, you just want to see everything that happens. If you're a fan of that game and you just want to watch it, you want to see everything that happens. When you're shooting that game, you're thinking specifically about what camera you're doing and what is your best job, what is the best way to do your job with that camera, knowing what your parameters are in the needs of the broadcast. So in a sense, we're doing the same thing or thinking about the same thing as far as the game and how it's progressing as a fan, yet we're doing things specifically to what the parameters of our specific camera are. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't know what else that really entails.
Yeah, certain cameras, like for football, like a game camera, a high 50 or a high 20, their thoughts are completely different than somebody's just doing a handheld on the field or someone that's doing a cart camera. You're dealing with a lot of different variables with each camera position. So it really changes as far as from position to position. For me, I've always listened to the announcers as the thing that I have turned up highest. The director, they're important, but I want to be ahead of the announcers on shooting stuff. And that's how I've always treated it, is that I always want to have the shot before they talk about it or before the director talks about it.
Which is interesting because a lot of fans, I don't think like that. That there's almost like an emotional control you have to have in shooting sports specifically. Because if not, you can get wrapped up in the emotion of stuff. And in some ways that can fuel you, but in other ways that can kill you. You can miss stuff if you get caught up in the whatever it is. I mean, imagine if you're, from our standpoint, if you're so busy caught up in the elation of a made basket or a made play that you miss the nuance of when this person, does the quick huddle or throws it halfway down the court or whatever it might be. I mean, there's so many variables in that. When Joe mentioned something, it immediately took me to the idea that there's a certain amount of emotional control that everyone has to have when shooting, even if it's your favorite team. I mean, you still have to be somewhat impartial to be able to be the recorder of the information. Would everyone agree or disagree? Or
when the Cubs won the World Series, many people asked me, how do you shoot that game and be the fan that you are? I said, I did it just like you. I cheered, I yelled, I stomped my feet, I cried, I waved, but I did it all on the inside.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
your job focus is the one. All the other stuff comes, on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right, Ish. So there's very few times doing games that I've gotten wrapped up in a game where I've had like goosebumps or crying or whatever. And, the 2 Steelers Super Bowls was one of them. The other one, there was a couple more though. The other one that I remember was Craig Janoff, the Super Bowl in Atlanta. It was his last game directing on Monday Night Football. And it was the Titans against the Rams. And it was that last drive where the entire Atlanta Superdome or whatever that was called at the time.
Yeah. Georgia Dome
was on their feet, and just hearing his voice and how excited but melancholy he was that it was the last game he was going to do with that crew. That was tough. And then, just that there's a couple of Little League World Series games where there's a coach who now is like an announcer a little bit with Little League World Series, Dave Bilal. He was one of the coaches for one of the Rhode Island teams. And some of his speeches, because the head coaches were mic'd, we got to listen to some of his speeches to these kids, the speeches that he would make during the game and then after the game. But the speech he made after his team lost and how proud he was, man, that was I'm running camera crying like a baby. And, that never happens. So there's been very few times where I've gotten emotional running camera, and that was one of them.
All right. Well, I don't want to hold anybody any longer. We've covered a lot, and I think we've definitely expressed a lot, and I appreciate everybody's time. If there's anything that anybody wants to add in general, this is the time to do it. In terms of...
Do I send in an expense report to you?
I'm sure you can.
Is that cool?
It's admin time. It's your admin time.
I punched in 2.5 hours ago.
Admin time. But again,
well, hopefully we'll see each other sooner than later.
Absolutely.
I don't have one feeling either way. I don't know what's going to happen.
One quick thing from here.
Yeah.
there's a wonderful camaraderie that we have nationally with all camera operators for all networks. It's a really nice fraternity or sorority, I guess, of people. And the camaraderie that we have collectively, coast to coast in North America, is just a wonderful thing. And we're all very lucky to have had this job. Hopefully, we're still having this job beyond the pandemic, but I'm really proud to be part of this fraternity. And it's a really great, great group of people. And and we're so lucky to have had enjoyable jobs. And I don't discount that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why, quite frankly, we're doing this, because we don't know what the future holds, quite frankly. You know, it would be remiss of us to just assume that it's just going to go on the way that we know it to have been in the past moving forward. And I didn't want this time to be taken lightly and for these stories to be sort of lost in the sauce, you know, if nothing else, just for us. And hopefully we can get this on a platform that other people can appreciate and reminisce and overstand. I mean, I do hope that the future is better for us, but we don't know. And if for whatever reason it isn't, you know, I found it important to capture the people who have brought so much laughter and joy and just good times and memories for people, whether they realize it or not. Because whether people realize it or not, the people who are on this phone specifically right now and others that I've spoken to have brought all these moments right to people's homes because of their eye, because of their instinct, because of their professionalism. And because we're not the athletes, no one knows. They only see the athlete or the logo of the channel. And though that has its place, we all know that it's a team of 30 some odd people who actually make this happen, or more, you know, day in and day out. And I just thought that our stories collectively were important enough to catalog and share, you know. So you know, thank you. And hopefully other people will appreciate. And if nothing else, we know they are when they're watching television. You know.
Well, bravo, Devin. Good job.
Yeah, thank you, Devin.
Thanks, Devin.
No, thank you. Thank you all for the time.
Thanks, Devin.
You know, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Cheese. Al, everybody.
Everybody stay safe and wear your
Yes.
masks, please.
Yes. Please stay safe.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right,
Thank
everybody
you.
have a good one. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
All right,
Take
bye-bye.
care.
I want to dedicate this episode to Jimmy Moore, an ESPN director who inevitably brought us all together. Though most of us might have met before him, it was definitely his show that brought us all together as a unit. He always strived for excellence on his show, and though we may have never had a perfect show, the one thing that was definitely apparent was that we had quality people around us. To be on a Jimmy Moore show was to be on an all-star show of who's who of any level of production. It didn't matter if you were camera or tape or anyone associated with the production. And for that was an awesome experience. Dedications out to Jimmy Moore, who recently retired.